So here we are at Abbey Road in London. Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm sitting here with Ollie Morgan, mastering engineer at Abbey Road. How are you?
All good, yeah. Nice to have you in.
Thank you. Now you told me off camera this is room 35.
Correct.
I'm not sure why, but apparently it's called room 35.
Because there's at least 35 rooms.
And this, as I'm sure our good friend Adam is going to show us on camera and pan around, is a room. It's an Atmos or an immersive audio room, which actually would be one of my first questions. Are you working, when you're doing stuff and mastering in immersive, is it specific to Atmos, or are you getting 360, you're getting...
Atmos. Yeah, so we are using the Dolby tools in here.
Yep.
So the masters we're supplying are Atmos masters.
Right. Are they able to, in deliverables, fold down to 360 as well?
So they all, they're different ways to get to the same result, I suppose. So
Okay.
they're all immersive formats. What Dolby has done with Apple Music now is the binaural render, which is kind of the big one. So it's kind of the main one.
So what kind of stuff are you given here to? I mean, what are the deliverables?
Deliverables, it's just a WAV file. So
Yeah.
what we give back is just a broadcast WAV.
Right. Right.
It's an ADM, so it's just a WAV of audio in the same way a stereo WAV is,
Right.
and it's audio paired with positional information for where that sound stays and lives.
I mean, mastering and immersive, is that? I mean, are you finding? Because what I've noticed, we've done a lot of interviews in Atmos, like tons of mixes.
Yeah.
There seems to be, how can I say this politely or rightly? There is no
worry.
standard, like
Yeah.
zero standard.
Yeah.
Like some stuff I'm hearing is like incredibly positional, and people are going nuts with flying stuff all around, and then somebody like Bob Clearmountain.
Yeah.
You literally feel like you're sitting in the middle of the band, and it's around you.
Yeah.
He's not going, oh, the tambourine's over here and the acoustics over there. He's just kind of. So for mastering, how does that affect your decision making? Because
Kind of in the same. So mastering in Atmos is the same, or in any immersive format is the same as mastering for stereo.
right,
In that you're the last person who's going to listen to something before it's out, aside from approvals and stuff. You're the last person who's going to interact with the audio before it gets released.
because in mixes it's so diverse in the way people
Yeah.
are mixing. How does that affect?
I suppose it's any, so like you say, each mixer kind of has a way that they like to do things, in the same way that any stereo album is a mixer who likes to, who might like their top end a certain way or bass a certain way, whatever. So it's a similar kind of variation. I guess if you
Times
have
a lot more speakers.
times a lot more speakers
Yeah.
and a lot more variables in a way. So, if you have an Atmos album, for example, that's done by a few different mixers. So something I did recently, there were 3 different mixers across an EP, or 2 different mixers across an album that I did recently. So that's the value is the same as in any other mastering situation where you're trying to marry these different mixes so that the album, you press play at track 1, and then by the time you get to the end of track 12, you feel like you've experienced an album start to finish, not a collection of 12 individual songs. And that's the same thing as mastering has always been.
So what are the sort of challenges? I've talked to a couple of mastering engineers in Atmos, and I don't know what your technique is, but I've seen a lot of people like employing like a phantom center, and then taking that kind of compression technique and applying it through everything, so everything sort of breathes together. Is that something you employ?
Yeah, so side chaining, things to make stuff move in that kind of familiar way. You can use bus channels and master channels, but then instead of going to the bed output, which is like your standard 712, instead of going to that, you can then go back to objects so that they will then interact with each other in a similar way that mixing in a bed would. So you can, stuff like that. Also, it's nice to take advantage of the fact that stuff doesn't have to pump and be as loud. You know, it doesn't mean that you have to recreate that. If you're recreating that as a musical thing, then there are other ways you can do that than just having to slam everything. You know, if you want something that sounds slammed, then you can do it with distortion or saturation or some other tool to make that excitement without having to get rid of dynamic range.
Do you have a set standard of repeatability, so you know
Yeah.
that everything that you're doing is always coming at a...
So the part built into the Atmos specs is that everything's at minus 18 LUFS integrated. So like, you know, integrated isn't that much of a useful metric because we don't, you know, people don't hear in like, oh, that song was that loud. You know, we don't hear like that. We hear much shorter snippets, but that's like a standard of the format. So there's that, which is kind of the starting point, I suppose. So I'll typically, if I'm doing a multi-song release, then I'll make each song work together and then make sure the loudest one is an out of spec. And then you can kind of still get the movement of a release, provided that that's then treated in the right way on the platform and all that kind of stuff. You know, there's a lot more that has to interact with that. But I always think, you know, if we get it right here, so that when it leaves here it's right, then, you know, another benefit of the format is that it can be updated, and things can play back differently as the binaural gets better or the re-rendering gets better. That's on playback. So
Are you able to emulate that? Like listen how other people would listen?
Yeah. So we've got the Apple over-ear headphones there. So we can run everything back from the renderer into them. So we can hear what it will sound like on Apple Music. We can then reference the Dolby binaural, which is what anyone who hasn't got Apple headphones will hear on Apple Music or on Amazon or Tidal. We can listen to stereo re-render, 5.1, whatever you want.
Right.
Domestic things, so like something that replicates like an AirPod. AirPod? Is that right? No, the Apple like smart speaker thing. HomePod.
Thank you. I actually just like blaming.
So that's something that emulates that, or if you've got a sound bar, if you've got an Apple TV plugged into a sound bar, that will play back differently. That's part of the thing that we tried to make with this room, is having somewhere that we can listen, you know, like a consumer might,
Right.
and try and get that impression across Apple and the Dolby binaural and stereo and 5.1 and whatever, to kind of build a better picture of what's actually happening.
Sounds like quite a challenge, to be honest.
Yeah. There's a lot more. It's tricky. It can be tricky.
And I presume you're continually listening to other people's releases to seeing where things are going.
Yeah. I've noticed that even recently, things that I listen to are sounding more refined, you could say. So things I'm listening to are more impressive now than maybe things I heard a year ago when this all started.
No ID Space in LA a few weeks ago, and I've noticed with like hip hop, and dance music is pretty much built for Atmos.
Yeah.
Because the low end can be so good, and then the object-based stuff you can position, you know, virtual instruments in a place and keep them there.
Yeah.
We're in a more rock-based world where we've got
Yeah.
ambience and bleed between instruments.
Yeah. I mean, I think what makes, you know, even in going back to stereo, I try and like draw parallels to stereo where possible, because it seems like this big, new, scary, strange thing. But if you kind of have its roots back in something that's very familiar to us, I think it makes it easier to kind of understand. So like if we think about stereo, you can make, you know, if you want track 3 of your album to be quite small, you can make it quite mono and maybe make it quite dull or whatever, and focus it in. Imagine and what gives you that impression is maybe track 2 was very wide and massive, and so is track 4. Imagine if you could do that, but have track 2 and track 4 even bigger, and then track 3 can be even smaller. Then it kind of gives you this range that you can. It's just another tool to be able to push whatever your intention is for whatever you're making. Just because it's more about, it can be more about what you're not using than what you are using. And if you've got more that you can use, it's also more that you can not use, to kind of create that dynamic nature.
So how much demand has there been for Atmos mastering for you?
Plenty, a lot,
Wow.
more than I was expecting there to be a fair amount, and there's more than I was expecting. So it's been
More work than you know how to deal with? Or?
No, not quite.
Oh, okay.
Not quite.
Right.
But no, it's been good, and it's been embraced in a way that I wasn't sure if it would. But again, it's the values of mastering is the same, so it's required in the same way, and it was just that it wasn't something that was being offered initially when all of this was kicking off. Everyone was catching up, and now we've caught up, and are able to do it, which means that the people who are listening get a better thing to listen to, because it's refined in the same way that stereo always has been. So if you can do the same thing and make sure that what people are listening to is the best it can be, then
I suppose we haven't had like a massive format change since the 80s,
no, exactly.
since CDs.
Yeah, exactly. And it's I think if you're talking about surround SACDs maybe, so
But that never
so
really got there.
exactly, and because people had to go out and buy new amplifiers and a load more speakers, whatever, but your soundbar that's attached to your TV can do this, pretty much. And any new playback, anything that you buy will be able to do this, So it's kind of like the consumer doesn't have to buy in the same way that they've had to before, which makes it more possible to stick around and be the thing, because you don't need the buy-in.
And every kid that's got a virtual reality
Yeah,
headset
exactly, yeah.
is hearing in 360
Yeah,
anyway. So.
yeah. And Logic now, the new version of Logic, you can mix Atmos. So there are kids now who are making stuff in their bedrooms who are starting their music making journey being able to make Atmos. So that's all that's how you work, and that's how you think, and that's how you mix and how you create, which I think is a pretty exciting place to be.
So let's talk a little bit about you. How did you get here? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So I started at a place called Fluid Mastering, which was in Hammersmith. They've moved out of London now, but two guys.
Did you come straight out of school into that?
Yeah. So to uni, out of school into uni. So first I had an amazing teacher at secondary school, as lots of things are, and she kind of showed me mastering first and what that was. Kind of did it the wrong way around, where I got into mastering.
So like
kind
at
of
16
before.
years old,
Yeah.
you're being told about mastering. Wow.
Yeah, it was really incredible. It was like,
That's remarkable.
yeah, really amazing. So I grew up in West Wales, kind of almost in the middle of nowhere, not quite, but almost. And then this idea that, like, she had a very successful career in London, so this idea that you could, make it and do this thing in the music industry and go there and it would work. And
If you had a Welsh accent, it's definitely softened.
it's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Happy St. David's Day 2 days ago?
Yesterday, yeah.
Yesterday.
Yeah, I was driving over Waterloo Bridge and I saw, I don't know what building it was, but the Welsh flag.
To the Welsh flag.
Yeah.
I mean, we can all agree that the Welsh flag is the coolest flag.
It's the
in
best
world.
flag, yeah. It's not the actual flag, that's the problem.
Yeah,
It's
I know,
it's like a show flag,
I like
but it works for me.
I remember the first time I brought my family over to Britain from America. My son was probably barely talking.
Yeah.
But we drove into Wales to see some family, and as you see the flag, it's like I just told him, "This is where dragons come from."
Yeah, there you go.
And that's it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just sold.
Yeah, that's all you need.
It's the coolest flag. We all know. We can all agree. So you're born in Wales at 16. You're being told about mastering.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how does that happen?
So our school started doing music tech, and
Okay.
was the only one in a quite a large radius though, because countryside. So, but yeah. So this teacher, she moved from London to Wales and started teaching at this school that I was at, which had an amazing kind of creative department generally.
And she was a mastering engineer.
Yeah, so all sorts, did all sorts. It was kind of like a gigging musician, engineer, but one of those things was mastering. And I can't remember why mastering. I guess it's that combination of like I latched on to something, and she had the knowledge and tools to be able to show me what that was. So yeah. I don't know. It's just one of those things that now I'm like, oh, so that's how it ended up working.
So where did you go to university?
So then I went to Kingston first, dropped out there and went to a place called Tech Music School, which is now BIM,
Okay.
in Fulham. So BIM London. It was by the time I graduated, I think. And then during my final year there is when I started at Fluid Mastering. So I just started there as an intern.
Were you interning while still finishing up school?
Yeah.
Was it part of the course requirement?
No. We went there to a project got mastered there that I had worked on via the university, and then I went back the next day, and I think I went back to pick up a hard drive or something, like an excuse to go and knock on the door and ask them if they needed anyone, which they kind of did, kind of didn't, but I ended up there.
But if it's an intern, it's...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, make tea, welcome people when they arrive, and sit at the back quietly and take notes and that kind of thing. So that was basically the first year. Yeah, was taking notes and making tea, and then gradually just got more involved, I guess. And they were really good. So it was basically the three of us. Tim Debney, Nick Watson, they own the company, and then me as like the junior engineer. So I got to watch how both of them work, which was amazing because I kind of picked up different bits from both of them, and then the way I worked became a kind of weird half and half of the two of them.
Are they very different in their approaches?
Yeah. One more hands-on, one more hands-off. So yeah, that contrast. I think if I had two of one type or two of another type or of a certain way of working, then that would have changed. I feel very lucky that I was given this quite broad. It's like mastering can be anything between here and here. So
is it
find
more
your own.
hardware based or software based or combination?
Hardware, yeah.
Hardware.
Well, combination always. There's modern music making is a combination of the two, but few bits, quite modest, I suppose, but enough bits of gear to have a bit of fun.
What kind of pieces?
Massive Passive, classic MEA2, the Prism EQ, both of which I've got in my room here as well. What else? Rupert Neve Designs Portico thing, with the parallel control in it.
Yeah, Pete Lyman uses those as well. They
Yeah,
should be quite popular.
really good. It's got that silk as well.
Yeah.
And the silk on the unit that we had there, I'm pretty sure it was the wrong way around. So the blue is supposed to be low mids and the red is supposed to be the tops. So, but in my head, that's still the other way around. So I got a unit to demo recently, and I was really confused why it's the wrong way around. But I think ours was the wrong way around. There you go. Yeah.
There's always been a lot of discussion about that, where people are saying, shouldn't the red be kind of the warmth?
Yeah,
and the
exactly.
blue, the kind of highs.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the right way around.
Yeah, it's so So that yours was actually wired that way around?
Yeah, I think
Oh.
I think it was just wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, you had the
I still don't know because
Yeah.
in my head that's the right way. So
Yeah.
the only one I've ever used has been that way around. So
Oh,
that's the
there you
right
go.
way, isn't it?
Maybe they reversed it because they liked the color coordination.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
So were you taught specifically, or do you think you just picked it up?
Mastering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was taught.
Because when I think about it, every mastering engineer I've spoken to
Yeah.
has basically had an apprenticeship by working at a mastering studio.
Yeah.
I've never actually had one tell me, well, John told me to boost this and cut that and do this and do that.
Yeah.
Is it more of a case of encouraging you or teaching you how to listen?
Yeah. I mean, you gotta. Yeah, you learn. What's different about mastering in any other part of the production process, I suppose, is the way in which you're listening. I feel like you're listening more to the thing as a whole, maybe, rather than pinpointing more exact things, because I suppose as a reflect of what you can actually then do to what you're listening to. And knowing that no one else is going to listen to it. It's that thing of knowing that once I've finished working, aside from approvals, no one's going to touch this audio again. So I've got to make sure that there isn't a safety net after, maybe, or whatever that is, of just knowing that this is going to be how it is.
Do you find do you work closely with artist producers, or do you find a lot of the time that
It's a mix, I suppose. It's a complete mix. So
Right.
some people are very involved and kind of come with ideas and how they think they want things to go. Others are very much like, I don't know what you do. I don't want to know what you do. Do something. It's all part of the variation, which I enjoy. I enjoy how.
Is there any sort of particular sound you always have in your head that you try to create? I asked that because there was a time where I noticed like a little bit of a glassiness in a lot of the US mastering engineers, which was strangely enough kind of a 2K bump.
Yeah.
Like around the 2K, you kind of get that little, I don't know how to explain, like a
Yeah,
glassy,
yeah.
brings a vocal forward in a very...
Yeah. Well, I think there are trends always.
Yeah.
I feel like the 90s or noughties was very bright.
Yeah.
And now 2010s, much heavier bottom end. It's kind of like, I think, just generally, if you're going to generalize a time, I think we just go through trends. 80s bright, 70s not so bright, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I do feel like you talk about the 90s and the early 2000s felt, especially in rock, everything was like splashy.
Yeah. Like
aggressive.
Like right here.
Yeah.
That was partly loudness as well.
Yeah. Right. Sort of a distortion of highs.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff sounds absolutely dreadful now.
Yeah. Really bad.
Really, really bad.
Yeah.
Especially a lot of those kind of emo rock bands. I'll put on a cell phone and play something back, and all you hear is
Yeah.
Does not translate.
Yeah. A lot of my favourite, I listened to some of my favourite albums when I was younger, and I'll be like, that's a shame.
Yeah.
It really doesn't sound that great.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. But it's the times, the fashions of the times.
Well, and also because they didn't have that medium, did they?
Yeah,
Nobody was listening on the earbuds, really,
Yeah.
or cell phones, or iPads, or even computer speakers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough listening to some of those records, but then also it's not entirely the mastering engineer's fault. I mean, sometimes you're given stuff that's you can only do so much.
Yeah, well, I suppose if it's a sign of the times and trends, then each part of the process is moving towards that trend. So if the mixer's mixing a bit a bit more top end than maybe they do now, so is the mastering engineer, then the result that you get is different.
How about the tools as well? Because when I think about it, I was talking to Bob Clearmountain about this, and we were talking about the fact that things are a little bit safe at the moment because they can be. Because
Yeah.
now you have like dynamic EQs, multiband compressors
yeah.
and stuff that, like
Yeah.
Soothe 2 is an incredible tool. I'm
Yeah.
sure you've used
Yeah.
it. But if you go through every single element of your mix and
Yeah.
apply some kind of dynamic or multiband compressor,
Yeah.
you end up with the most perfect,
Yeah.
potentially boring mix
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
ever heard in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's also a lot to be said that some of the worst sounding things are still some of my favorite things to listen to because
Right.
it's not about how good something sounds. It's about whether something sounds appropriate for what it's trying
Sure.
to do. You know, so then they're two different equations, two different things to think about.
Yeah, you don't want your punk song to be
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
the prettiest, nicest,
Yeah.
safest mix. Yeah,
Yeah.
hi-fi perfection. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
I always use the Stooges' raw power when the guitar solo comes in at the beginning of the song. I think it's 6 dB louder than anything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
The whole band just kind of disappears. And
Yeah,
the first time I heard it as a kid, I threw off the headphones and then immediately put them back on it like
Yeah.
it was the best thing.
What's
ever.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, what is that? It's great. I'd heard about this legendary band, and
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
finally hearing it.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about stem mastering. 'Cause I
Yeah.
know it's something
Yeah.
you're passionate about.
Yeah. That kind of started while I was at Fluid.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of started doing STEM stuff then. We had in the building were a few different rooms that were lets for production spaces, and then one of them moved out. So instead of hiring that room out again, we kind of took it over, and I started doing STEM stuff in there.
What year was this?
Oh God, no idea.
I'm just thinking because I know about 10, 15 years ago I was getting asked for stems.
Yeah.
And it's disappeared for a while, but
Yeah,
I got
yeah,
asked
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot there because I found that everybody was really concerned about being loud.
Mm-hmm.
And if they felt like they could get
yeah.
like stereo drums,
Yeah.
stereo guitars, whatever, they could
Yeah.
individually process those
Yeah.
elements, fold them back into stereo,
Yeah.
and make them the loudest thing you've ever
Yeah.
heard.
Yeah, I'm thinking this is probably 6 years ago, maybe
Right,
7
right.
years ago, maybe. I don't
So
know.
you're asking for stems for
Yeah.
mastering.
Yeah.
What's your perspective? How do you feel like it benefits?
It's more that you can, you don't have to decide more this or that, I find. So
Right.
if I'm stereo mastering, then if there's, classic example would be a bright vocal and a dull drum track, for example. If
Yeah.
you want to get more energy in the drums, then now the vocal is too bright and you can de-ess it or you can whatever you want to it. But you're kind of having to decide how much too bright is okay for the vocal and how much too dull is okay for the drums. For example,
Right.
stem mastering, you just make one brighter and don't make the other brighter. And then everyone can win. It's kind of how I think about it.
No, it sounds absolutely perfect. But you do know all of the troll comments at the moment are saying something like, "Shouldn't the mixer give you a better mix? Shouldn't That's where the brains are going to go."
Yeah. I mean, I find that an interesting one because, you could possibly say that as well about the extra dB at top end that
Sure.
a mastering engine that gives a stereo track. Why can't the mixer do that as well?
Right.
It's kind of the same. It's the same. Our job is to listen to something fresh that we haven't listened to before, make quite quick judgments about it while it's fresh, and try and get what we're listening to into this window that we think is the best place for the song. So yeah, I mean the mixer could do that, but if the mixer didn't do that, then it's nice to be able to do that rather than to go, oh well, the mixer didn't do it, so oh well, never mind, maybe next time.
Right.
That doesn't work for me.
Right. And obviously with stem mastering as well, that can work really well for Atmos as well.
Yeah. So you can, something I did a little while ago now, but yeah, we mastered from stems for stereo, and then you can then use those mastered stems to make an Atmos thing. So remains integral to the stereo master that you have, and it's also immersive.
Right. And presumably, well, it depends how the stems are being made. So do you get? I know with some mixers, what they do is they create like a phantom stereo bus.
Yeah.
Do you like that, or do you prefer not to?
I honestly, however they are delivered to me is how I want them. So I don't want anyone to change how they're working or to try and imagine what I want to use. I want to receive where you've finished your process. So you're done. You've done everything that you want to do creatively. You're done, and now you give it to me. I don't want to have to redo anything that you could have done or that you did do. And the same goes for stereo bus compression. You know, if it's crazy, then yeah, I might suggest backing off a bit. But generally, if that's what you like, and if you've mixed into this thing, and now you take that thing off, then I'm now having to imagine what that sounded like to you, and how that felt. And
well, when you're getting the stems, to further to that point, when you're getting the stems, do you ask for a stereo mix?
Yeah.
Like how they had it originally, and then have them stem it?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I almost feel like depending on how the stereo bus compression is done, there's probably sometimes it's beneficial, but in some ways, probably many times it's not.
Yeah. Well, it's probably about 50-50. You know, I think it's options. It's just about options. You know, if I get, but people also ask me how many stems is the right amount of stems as well, which is, again, I find that interesting a question, because I don't really care. I don't really mind. You know, whatever is your end point, that's where I want to begin. You know, so whether that's 2 stems or whether that's 20 stems, I don't really mind. You know, and to the same point, and your question was again?
Well, see, when I think of stereo bus,
yeah,
creating stems. If you're slamming a track pretty heavily, and you've got your SSL 4000 bus compressor going, and it's pumping on the kick and snare, or probably more negatively on the low end, which is very typical, especially when mixing through an old school SSL, which doesn't have a sidechain function. You're going to get a lot of movement from the low end.
Yeah.
Now, if you choose to have that phantom, so have a track off to the side that's triggering it, so everything prints individually through it, but still gets the same, sidechain compression, sidechaining effect. That could or couldn't be bad.
Yeah.
Because you might benefit from having somebody like you, hear what the stereo mix is, but not necessarily be abused by the low end.
Yeah. I could go, oh, interesting. So I like the way that the bass is being slammed by the kicks. I would rather the strings weren't also being ducked at the same time.
Right.
So how about I sidechain the kick to the bass, and then do that, and then I'll leave the strings alone.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, it's a good reference, because you get to hear where they're at with it, and then you can do something, and then together you decide whether it's better or worse than what you were sent.
So the next obvious question is, do you charge the same amount to master a stem mix than you would mastering just a stereo?
Yes. So it's the same.
Huh?
It's the same. My time costs a certain amount of money, and how much time I spend. So I might spend a little bit longer on a stem project, not necessarily, but yeah, the cost is the same.
Okay, that's good.
because it's not it's not. I don't think my job is to listen to stuff and to try and make it better, whether I'm doing it stereo or stems. It's not a different job.
So tell us a little bit about the setup in here. I see they're all ATCs.
Yep.
When was this room get built?
We've probably been not that long, maybe 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, pretty.
Very fresh.
Yeah. I think so. Merrick? About 6 months.
Yeah.
Do you think?
I mean, this was kind of your brainchild, wasn't it?
Yeah.
This whole thing.
Yeah, and I think it took about 18 months to get it built, so it's been built for about 6 months.
Incredible. So all ATCs, are these your preferred speakers for mastering anyway?
So this room built by the main thinker behind the room is Dan Cole, who's on the technical team, and he's incredible. And he knows all about all of this stuff. And this room was built kind of in the image of the penthouse, which is another one of our rooms, and that is all ATC, so it makes sense to have the same monitoring in here, just so that between
and the characteristics of the room similar. So
so the penthouse is much bigger. That's a mixed space for cinema, bits of film they do in there, but also Atmos mixing as well. So just kind of so that we're using the same conversion and the same monitoring tools, all the Dadman stuff. ATCs, and then
what are the converters?
Just the Digital Audio Denmark.
Okay.
But we don't. So we've got 8 channels of out because that's all you need. No. So all the speaker outs, and then just a couple of spares. So we are going to have like an analog loop in here soon, incoming. So back to your point about stem mastering to Atmos.
Yep.
I can do stem projects in here and then not have to leave room 6, which is my other room, to come in here to do them in Atmos.
So the Bauer speakers, how did you put it? Doctor Who-ish?
Doctor Who-ish, yeah.
Yeah, I'd go with that.
Yeah.
I think that was well said. But I suppose they're great. They're a total centerpiece. But vintage is well represented in this room, to say the least.
Yeah.
I suppose starting from the left, a lathe.
Yeah. Still gets plenty of use.
How often are you cutting onto the lathe?
Weekly.
Weekly?
Yeah. Sean, who is opposite, so all of us are on day off shifts, so
Okay.
2 engineers per room. So Sean, who I share the room with, he cuts more than I do, and he's probably cutting daily.
That's incredible.
A prolific cutter, is Sean.
Lovely. That's his speciality.
Yeah, I think so.
And then you actually were talking about the massive passive earlier.
Yeah. You kind of see them everywhere, really. Most mastering rooms, I think, have one of them, and Prism MEA2.
Masalek, yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty staples everywhere. This is the Abbey Road bit, the TG stuff, which I'm not sure. Outside of this building, there aren't that many of them around.
Not at all. Are you
I think there's
using
3 of them, maybe.
Are you using them regularly?
Yeah. The tone is on most things I do, probably.
Yeah.
Then these limiters have been modded by Ian Taylor, who's another one of the technical department team, to get them to work a bit better with kind of modern music, the kind of stuff that we're working on now.
Faster release times?
Yeah, like a bit quicker and can, it's because they're fixed threshold as well, so he's lifted that up because everything's a bit louder louder and has more energy, so it takes up more space in that sense. So they're quite like choosy about when you do use them, but when you do and when it works, they're amazing, really, really incredible.
So you're talking about the tone. What
Yeah.
do you favour it for low end?
Yeah. Also quite gentle shelves from, kind of 700 or down at like 300 is quite nice. So like just a gentle lift.
Right.
Anything above 300 is really nice. But generally I'll use like this blunt, sharp, medium controls instead of Q, which I quite like. The language.
Yeah.
So I'll be like, yeah, why not?
Blunt.
Blunt 260, whatever, Mainly, this gets more use than probably these combined.
Yeah,
to be
I
honest.
imagine.
But yeah, it's really nice.
When you're choosing to use some of the more vintage stuff, is it because you're getting something that I hate this word, but I'm going to use it. That sounds a little digital. And you're trying to make it.
Yeah, I suppose it's about getting to know all the bits, I guess, and then
Mm-hmm.
you know you just hear something and think, I don't know what it is that draws you to it, but something will draw you to a particular bit. Yeah, whatever that may be. It might not be that clear cut, but yeah,
Right.
that kind of idea.
I don't know anything about this. What's this? Is Chiswick Reach
Yeah, Chiswick
stereo
Reach.
valve
Yeah,
compressor?
I don't use it that often. I used it a lot more when I first arrived, but it's quite nice for like, it's more like program loudness
Mm-hmm.
rather than transient control. It's quite nice to have quite slow, keeping control of things can be quite nice. If I am going to compress out the box, I'll use the Very more.
Wonderful.
Yeah, really nice. And I'll use it probably more on the limit setting than the compress setting. It's just quicker. I think, I don't know if maybe I've just become more accustomed to quicker compressors generally, because working in the box, you just get used to things being snappier. So on the limit, I kind of, limit to me on this sounds more like a compressor in the box
I understand.
than a kind of something a bit more squidgy out of the box.
So if you're going for that for your low end, where's your high end coming from?
Usually the MEA. It'll probably be lows, mids, highs, if you're going to do that. Obviously, but at the same time, so Tim brought up Tim Debney before. He had this cool thing of giving away his secrets now, of just like this little 98 on kind of, seems to be a nice range for kind of the thud of kicks. It's quite nice just to get them. So sometimes you might get something where the kick feels a bit sunk, so you can just like give it a little bit of 98, which is quite nice. So, you know, again, this is more like notchy, thuddy, or knocky top end, bottom end, and then more like rumbly bottom end, maybe.
Right, I understand. I know a lot of mastering engineers run through the gear even if they're not actually boosting or cutting anything.
Yeah, I don't do that, but what I do is the way this whole desk, so this desk, all the TG stuff used to be in series, so you'd have to use the whole thing in series. What the technical team have done is break it all out into modules, and I can use each module separately on this insert switcher. So what I'll do sometimes is I'll just have Witchcraft and Voodoo, which is the input transformer and output transformer. So I'll have them in, but none of the gear in. So I might tweak in the box and then just run it through the transformers. Or, flip side, if I want to use the tone but I don't want to dirty it up with the sound of the transformers, then I can just run it through the tone if I want, which is mad that they've been able to do that with something that was built before I was born.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Are the faders in?
Fader can be in, yeah.
Oh,
I don't typically have it in, but yeah, you can. I know some of the engineers use it when they're cutting, just end aside, just to get rid of noise before the head comes up. But
what's your I/O in here?
so I am using this Mytech Manhattan mostly, but also benchmarks. Mostly coming out with this and then back in with the benchmark ADC. Just 2-channel, simple. I can also stem stuff. I can also use a couple of, we've got quite a lot of options in this room. So I can use a combination of a couple for, I'll have like an A stream and a B stream.
Right.
And then I can patch in different, so I could have like the tone on the A stream and the massive passive on B if I want. So I could have like an instrument and something else if I want.
Oh, lovely.
Which is very clever. Again, it's an Ian Taylor thing. He's a very clever, they're all very, very clever, the technical team. They're keeping this place running between them.
Amazing. Do you like the Weiss? Or the Vice?
Never use it. Did use the de-esser a lot at Fluid, but kind of stopped using it because I didn't have one in here. So I would get the de-esser probably. I know Frank uses this cutting, more for the filters when cutting. But yeah, mostly I still use this Accent 2 limiter just to take off a little bit before going back into the box. But mostly any digi tools is all in the box.
Did they used to have the? I know in LA for years I used to always see the Waves L2 hardware.
Yeah. There's one of them in Route 30.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, and any digi stuff really is in the box now because it's kind of probably the power that is in any of these is now in the box, so you don't need to rely on outboard digital maybe in the way.
Do you have favourite plugins?
Fab Filter Suite, just for like utility stuff, just does everything. The Q3 can, the fact that you can do mid-side and stereo, mono, left, right, whatever, in just the one plugin, it just means that you can whack it on anything and do whatever. I guess in the box is mostly more clinical, I suppose, so more like utility, clinical, fixing, and then out of the box is more like vibe-based, fun stuff. Is kind of tends to be how I work.
Makes sense.
It's not a rule, obviously, but it tends to be how it goes.
And also working in the box, you can get really clinical. You can have completely different EQ settings, and where here that wouldn't be possible.
Yeah. Like I've started recently doing kind of track-to-track stuff in the box, and then like album stuff out the box, which is quite cool. So I'll get the sound of the album here, and then make sure each track is kind of conformed before coming out of the box. Just been quite a nice way of working that I've started doing recently. But
sounds wonderful. Best of both worlds.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, amazing. Ollie, thanks ever so much.
Pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thanks everyone. So long. Farewell. Auf Wiedersehen. Au revoir. Adios. Tschüss. Goodbye. Tschüss.